All Things DER podcast, brought to you by AEIC. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Cook. In this podcast, I dig in, define, and discuss where the new energy economy is heading with electric industry leaders and explore all the ways that distributed energy resources can modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thank you for joining us. In today's episode, I'm talking with Jacob Tetlow, the Executive Vice President of Operations at Arizona Public Service Company. We discuss the impact that clean energy can have as we modernize the grid and focus on the fast-growing customer interest in solar power. From an innovative smart thermostat program to exploring key factors in successful implementation of greener energy, we dig into a variety of ways to identify new opportunities and drive the mission of cleaner energy forward.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an exciting topic. And as you well know, we've been on this journey together for about 6 years, and it plays an important part to the broader bulk electric system. So I'm very happy to be here.
So I guess one easy question for you is, what do you foresee as the opportunities and challenges of the industry's transition to clean, and specifically how it's changing the distribution system?
Sure, it's a nice softball. I appreciate that. You know, it's been a lot of change, right? And if you think about where we're going and where we've been, I do see it as both exciting, but I also view it as there's a lot of challenges that we have not quite figured out. Probably the biggest one as a system operators, how do we make sure that no matter what we do to the broader electric system, that we maintain reliability? It has to be reliable because that's critically important. It's an essential service for our community. And you've seen the consequences in Texas and in California, and there's supply chain challenges in the West. So those are the types of things that we have to collectively manage. So keeping it reliable, managing the cost side, because we want it to be a product customers can afford, and it betters people's lives. And it has to be safe, of course. And so when you think about those attributes, and then you think about where we're going from the challenge side is, well, how do you do all of that while you're keeping costs down, transitioning to clean, unwinding, if you will, in many cases, coal generation. APS is no different. We've announced the glide path for both of our last 2 remaining coal plants, bringing on large volumes of solar and wind energy storage. And how do you do all that in a way that you keep the costs down and you ensure that reliability will always be there? Today APS, we're excited that we're 50% carbon free, but we've said by 2050 we'll be 100%. Like everybody says 2050, and 2050 is a long ways off, right? But then you start kind of looking at your midterm targets and say, well, by 2030, we're going to be 65% clean and 45% renewable. And now you start thinking about, well, that's not really that far away, right? I mean, 8 years from now. And so we're actually procuring large volumes of energy today. We'll have 1,500 megawatts of batteries, renewables in service in the next 36 months. I mean, those are pretty big numbers in order to stay on that track.
I remember one comment you've always made when you were, presenting is in Arizona, you guys went from seeing, hundreds, maybe thousands to tens of thousands of solar interconnection requests over a very short period of time. I'll ask you, in Arizona, what growth are you experiencing with the other distributed energy resources?
Yeah, sure. Today we're at almost 140,000 residential. So you think about it, you say we have 1.3 million customers. So more than 1 in 10 customers has a solar panel on their roof. And I thought, as we have a resource proxy system that kind of adjusts for the export price, if you're going to have surplus solar back to the grid. So it's not quite I'll call it a fixed net energy metering, but it's a step in the right direction. But even with that, we continue to see no backing off of solar. I mean, last year alone was 22,000 solar systems. And so you think about that, I mean, that's more than 1 in 10 customers. It makes a substantial contribution to the system. And while it may be in a hot summer day when you're peaking your system load at 7,500 megawatts, that contribution to solar is pretty well managed. But on a spring day when, there's not a lot of air conditioning load and it's still putting out a lot of energy, and there's not a lot of system to take it, it actually does create some operational challenges. And we've talked about those in the past where you start to see voltage fluctuations or different operational challenges, and sometimes even all the way up to the subtransmission level. The new stuff that we're seeing today is, and still to be determined, I suppose, is residential battery storage, like how significant is that going to be? We have about 1,500 systems today. So a much smaller number, but you're starting to see it tick up. And probably, I think, I'm not happy to go into some detail. I love our Cool Rewards program with smart thermostats. I mean, it's literally a true working virtual power plant today. And that's the distribution grid with customers that are providing such an essential resource, and it really doesn't cost anything. And then you think about, where does vehicle to grids go, right? I mean, there's some huge opportunities that I think a lot of people think are far away, but you think about how much we've changed in just the last 3 or 4 or 5 years in solar, that opportunity exists as well. Happy to dive into any of those. Don't know where you want to go.
I was actually going to say, could you dive in a little bit more into the thermostat program and how you see it interacting or working?
Yeah, we call it Cool Rewards. It's probably a little extra convenient because it's 117 degrees, in the summertime here. So we have a lot of load. We have a lot of air conditioners turning. Sometimes when we get our heat waves, and the morning low is 91 degrees, you think about it, like the air conditioners never turn off. They just, cycle all day long. And so we have this program, we call it Cool Rewards. And what we do is we work with customers, bring your own device, we'll accommodate whatever. We don't try to pick the winners of the technology. What we're trying to do is interface with the technology. So we call it Cool Rewards. We have about 60,000 thermostats today that are registered. Our peak response last summer was nearly 80 megawatts. 80 megawatts is substantial. And it's a really cool program. We only do it 20 times a summer. Most customers don't even know when it's happening. We give us control of your thermostat. All we're going to do is on high load days, we're going to pre-cool your house in some cases, try to knock it down an extra 3 degrees before the peak comes. And then when the peak comes, we're going to let it drift up maybe 3 degrees, maybe 4 at the most. And that's how that program shaves the peak off of our demand in that summertime. And you think about what happens with the last megawatts that you bring on your system. It's probably your lowest heat rate unit. So it's probably got the worst, environmental impacts. It's the highest cost. It's going to have the worst heat rates. Most likely it's the last unit you're dispatching. And so now here it is. Every customer in APS territory benefits from those 60,000 smart thermostats. It's fair. There's no inequities that are created, unlike some of the challenges you might have in solar. So it's good for the environment, it's good for the grid, and it's good for customers. Like, it's the triple win. It's such a great program. And we'd love to scale that up, and we're working hard right now to scale that up.
That's very exciting. And I guess one thing that we talk a lot about in the DER subgroup is the different technology platforms. So we throw around a lot of acronyms: the OMS, outage management system, distribution management system, DMS, advanced distribution management system, ADMS. And then there's this thing called DERMS. And I jokingly tell everyone that wants to hear about it, which sadly my family and friends don't want to, but DERMS is a conversation that we have every meeting. What is DERMS? So I'm just wondering, for this thermostat program, is it a fully integrated DERMS or a platform that helps control that? Or is it more or less like a bolt-on that you're able to kind of communicate to those devices based on signals of, the grid's peak?
Yeah. And much like to your point, we're all still trying to figure out. We even rebranded it from DERMS to Enterprise Operating Platform for a while, and then we decided, no, let's just stick with DERMS. Today in our smart thermostat program, we partner with Energy Hub. So they're the interface to the customer device, and then we send a demand signal. We work with a resource plan. We say, is today one of the days where we'd want to pull that program into play? And in recognizing, we commit to customers because they get like $50 to sign up, and then we give them $35 a year to be part of it. And so there's a small financial benefit back to the customer. And then, we're only going to do it 20 times. So we work with our resource planning group to tell us, hey, this is one of the days we want to send a signal. And so we'll do that. And then we work with Energy Hub to actually send the signal to the Wi-Fi connected thermostats. So I guess you would call it kind of a bolt-on DERMS on a third-party platform.
Right. And I think a lot of, the discussions that we have, the utility space and our ability to be entrepreneurial in this innovation and technology, limits us because we're focused on safe, reliable power, lines, poles, transformers staying intact. So it is beneficial that we do have this surge of innovation outside the utility to help kind of create synergistic solutions. So Do you have any other innovative solutions that have been applied to help balance the load?
We do a little bit with water heaters. We do a little bit with pool pumps. The numbers there aren't as big, and the load impacts aren't as big. So I don't, we'll continue to explore those ones as other options. The one I think that has the most merit, me and you talked about it before, was electric vehicles. Today we got 25,000 electric vehicles in our service territory. It's not a huge number. But if you look at every major manufacturer, and Elizabeth, you know well that I've talked a lot about, I've been driving an EV for 6 years. I'm a big fan of the concept. And I always argue that, if you get home at the end of the day, there's plenty of energy left in that battery pack. It's an underutilized asset that's just sitting there. And so how do you connect with it? We talk about the F-150 and its ability to, put out 9 kilowatts, and it's almost like vehicle to grid sitting right there. So we are putting together the pilot. My team is working on how would we actually do that. We're getting a couple F-150s. We're talking about how do you set that up. Maybe it's a third-party supplier. I've actually talked with Energy Hub about this idea. They're excited about it. But think about if in the year 2030, this is our projection, and I know we all make a lot of projections on electric vehicles, but it's 450,000 is what we expect in our service territory. That's another example of a triple win, right? It's good for the environment. It helps clean up the air. It helps electrify things, gets rid of our dependence on foreign oils and things like that. That's kind of a big headline right now. When you think about that opportunity, if you really had 450,000 electric vehicles, and how much energy would be sitting in all those battery packs on a daily basis, it's a big number.
Just from a leader in this area, what is some advice that you can give, talking to all the different utility members, everyone's at a different maturity point, and there's a lot of internal stakeholder discussions that have to happen to really motivate some of that old school thinking in regards to it's coming, we need to prepare. So what would be some triggers or awareness to bring to those that are further down the evolution of our grid modernization plan, to what to be aware of and when to take action for this new dynamic?
Yeah, and I think the timing will probably depend a little bit. Every utility is in a little different environment. We obviously in Phoenix, we have a lot of sun. Solar is a really good resource here. Phoenix area has some pretty big air quality challenges. And so I tend to feel like that's an area that we really need to focus on. I believe to be successful, and I'm not suggesting I got all the answers, but one of the things that I think helps drive that, we have a group called Customer to Grid Solutions. And it's a group of people that are focused on how do you bring the customer along on this journey and have them be part of the solution where they benefit, the utility benefits. And if they benefit, we lower costs, it's good for the utility, it's good for all customers. And so that team manages those solar interconnects. We put a lot of work into trying to process them very quickly. While residential solar has its challenges, but we also want to embrace customer choice, and they do have their benefits for the environment as well. And so we try to support that program. We're also doing electric vehicle infrastructure chargers. We've got 400 level 2 plugs in. We're putting some DC fast chargers in some of the smaller rural areas that limit the ability of EVs to move around our state. So, having a team that's focused on those innovative solutions, I think is really important. They're also the same team that operates our marketplace on APS marketplace, where you can go get, thermostats with a rebate and a link to enroll them in the program. So it's that ability, because your transmission and your distribution teams and your generation teams, they got really important jobs to do, and they're really focused on bulk electric system and voltage and cap banks and load tap changers and the core things that make this system work, and peeling some people out of that equation and letting them focus on innovative solutions, I think is really helpful.
That is very helpful, because I think I find myself in that bucket now, moved away from the core operations and looking into all these different programs that you speak of. And so what I heard is really engaging the demand side, like getting with your customers first, and identify what are their needs, what are their desires, and then work to create those programs to onboard and move us forward. So that's great advice. Well, with that, I'm going to wrap up the podcast, and I just want to say thanks for attending again. And I look forward to continuing to identify our opportunities and driving our industry forward with you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you for doing what you're doing to help drive this mission forward too, because you've played a big role. You're very proactive. And so, a lot of appreciation back to you.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of All Things DER. Thanks for tuning in. I hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode next week. Until then, keep powering on.